Hey guys and guys, it's Nancy and Ritter, the girl in Latham from Screen, and you're watching Sit Down by the Fire with Eric.
Why, hello, everybody. This is Eric Vierthaler, host of the podcast Sit Down by the Fire. I'm here with my next special guest. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Matt Latham. I am a producer and editor for an upcoming feature film, independent feature film called I've Seen All I Need to See, which has just begun its festival run and doing pretty well. And it has a few more screenings coming up. It premiered at the Rhode Island International Film Festival and won Best Feature there, and then
Awesome.
just played at um, Montana International Film Festival and just got what they call the Spirit Award there. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, that's all definitely very exciting to hear about all that. But yeah, I've actually personally never have heard of a Spirit Award. And so, could you fill, so yeah, and so could you fill both in, so could you fill both me and all my people, tuning in as to what that entails?
Yeah, I can pull it up right here because we just won this. So it's called the Mint Spirit Award, and I don't know if it's an award given by the jury, and it sounds like it's kind of something to award the overall spirit of the film. So it's this is what the program director had to say. He said, "I've seen all I need to see as a highly creative, highly affecting, boundary-pushing work made within an economically sustainable model by committed cinematic artists." So for that, they gave us the Mint Spirit Award.
Awesome. Awesome. I am definitely very, very happy for I am definitely happy for you and everyone else involved.
Thank you.
Yeah. Certainly. And so yeah, and so how about that you tell me, my audience, so what exactly is this film about?
Yes. So it is about an actress in LA who, when she finds out that her sister has uh, died under unusual circumstances, she travels back to her hometown to retrace the steps of her sister and try and get at least an emotional sense of what happened, and it's tonally very much an exploration of just the state of grief, and it's a dramatic exploration of that, and the main character who we follow, we're just kind of tied very emotionally to the way that she's processing this, and as her sister who died was kind of a rougher person who was um dealing in um, kind of a little bit of shady underworld stuff. And so, as she is retracing her sister's steps, she kind of emotionally gets um, polluted with that dark energy as well.
Wow, and I mean that's all pretty heavy stuff like with grief and yeah, and and it's something that people all over the entire world like can relate to for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and we're very heartened to see that people seem to be responding to it because it's a very artistic portrait of that state of grief. So in that sense, it's a bit atypical as a movie. It's much more uh, kind of emotional and philosophical in its approach rather than being very plot heavy. Uh,
Mhm.
and so it's not really about what happens; it's about how it feels as it's going along. So the film itself stylistically is very different. For example, there's um, kind of just moments where we just hold on the shot for a very long time for several minutes. And we just kind of sit in the stillness of that. and it's about the feelings that come up and sitting with those feelings. And so, because of how unusual it is, we weren't certain how much people would uh, respond to it because it is very artsy. But as I've said, since it's been doing pretty well at the festivals, like I said, it won Best Feature at Rhode Island and this award here at Mint, and that those are pretty much the first couple of festivals that it's been playing, and with several more coming up within the next few months. But uh, yeah, that just kind of goes to show that people have been responding to it. Like you said, it is a relatable subject matter. So even though the film itself is unusual, I think people are appreciating that it is this unusual approach to this feeling that nevertheless registers as familiar.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And it's just that I mean, there already are so many movies about the topic of grief, but it's just that if you do something new with it, it could definitely catch people's attention.
Yep.
Yeah, and so grief is often said to be a roller coaster, which yeah, I mean, it definitely is true. There are some days as to where there are some days where you feel better. Maybe it's because there's more vitamin D, or maybe it's just what's going on in your life in general as to why you could be better. But say if it's like the 1 year anniversary or 2 year anniversary and so on and so forth, you and then are reminded of it. And so therefore all those negative emotions are coming back. Or say if you run into like a relative of said person who passed away, that also can also bring up some negative emotions as well. And yeah, and there are some people as to where that they feel like that, oh, you lose them, you grieve for about a week, and then people expect you to just move on, where it's really not that simple. It's way more nuanced than that. And sadly, I have gone to so many funeral services where like the mother, or just people who were super super close with that person, either on the family level or on the friendship level, where they're getting all this support like on the day of the funeral or on the week of that they passed away. But then as time passes by, they then don't reach out to them anymore. They just don't even bother to contact them. And that's really, really sad. It's because, grief is something that takes time. Now, there are some people like who will grieve a lot faster than others. And I mean, whatever works for that person. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a pretty nuanced topic.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very individual, and so it
Mhm.
can vary from individual to individual, but also, as you're saying, it's ultimately something that people have to go through themselves in a way, because, the community and the other people, they'll they'll be able to support you for a while, or, try to, but it's true that for them, they life goes on, and they can't provide that same level of intense emotional support um, for forever, and that might also not even be what the person or the people who are grieving would want. A lot of times, sometimes don't um they don't want other people's um attention regarding it. They just kind of want to mourn privately. But it varies. So yeah, you know it's it it's an extreme thing that is processed differently by different people.
Mhm, yep.
And there's I think there's even that saying, there's not really any wrong way to grieve, or however you grieve it's very personal. And so, there's
Yep.
some people that um they might um respond with humor, There's some people, so they might joke about it, and that's part of their grieving process. In the case of our movie, our main character, it leads even to some violent impulses that come out. So
Yeah,
that's,
and and I mean, of course, I'm not trying to blanket every single person like who goes through the grieving process, but but I actually have met people like who actually will take their grieving process like to that like they will take it that far as to where that they'll act violently when a lot of times normally they never would. But it just depends on the person, and on top of that, it's also very common like for people to like to rely on alcohol just to cope with it, and it's very common for people to rely on drugs. And so therefore now of course I cannot speak on the behalf of like of everybody, but it would make sense that for some people, if they are going to take it that far, if they are going to be violent about it, it makes sense that alcohol or alcoholic or any other drug would be a component.
yeah, and people want to numb their emotions, and it's it all makes sense, which is why there's that saying, there's no wrong way to grieve.
Yep.
It's as far as at least that element of processing the grief goes, there's no wrong way to do it. I mean, if you begin acting violently towards other people, then or creating problems, then that part is not the best. But yeah, I think our film, because it's constructed to give so much space, there's a lot of space where there's a lot of time where nothing too much is happening, and you're just sort of sitting with the feeling of it. I think what that does is it allows the individual audience members to kind of project their own feelings, like how they would individually go through their grieving process, or how they individually understand grief, is something that they can kind of fill into the movie, which makes it
Hmm.
more personal for them. At least I'm hoping that that's how it's been playing for audiences, and why they've been responding to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say considering that the film has already won some awards, I definitely would say that what you guys were hoping for the audiences definitely has been. But yeah, I definitely would say that that's been going well.
Yep, we're happy about that.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And so correct me if I'm wrong. You were the editor, right?
Correct. Yeah, I was
Awesome,
the
and
producer and the editor.
awesome, yeah, and
One of
so
the producers. There were several producers.
right, yeah, and I mean, oftentimes, like within the world of making movies, I mean, you'll find some movies where there only was one producer, and I mean, my hat goes off to them for sure. But but oftentimes there definitely is more than one.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so how about they tell me and my audience, and so how exactly was that experience like?
Yeah, so I worked together this team has worked together on a previous movie called The Build Out, which is sort of a horror movie with a little bit of a found footage element, or at least it has the feeling of a found footage horror film, but it kind of goes a bit more into um, more of a supernatural rather than horror direction. And
Hmm.
that movie as well is sort of unusual in its approach, and it's more feeling based than plot based. But that came out. That went through festivals throughout the past couple of years and came out um, earlier this year on VOD and streaming. And so that is available now. It's called The Build Out. And so yeah, when that finished up, the writer director of that, wrote this other script for this movie, and so we all kind of immediately rolled right into working on that. And so, yeah, knowing that I was going to edit that, I wanted to be more involved with the production, just because, in my feeling, my personal opinion is it's very good to have the editor involved as
Mhm.
soon as possible. A lot of the time, the editor is not really brought on until later, but I think that there's a lot of things that an editor can give input on early on that would help the editorial process and just help the film as a whole. And I think it can also make things a lot more efficient. Uh, so I was more involved in this one. I was on set every day, and I acted kind of as a de facto script supervisor, just kind of keeping track of all the takes and seeing all the takes and making sure we were getting everything we needed to get. And yeah, we shot it pretty quickly in two parts. So part of the film takes place in LA, and then part of it takes place in, we don't name the town in the movie, but we shot it in Tucson, Arizona. And
Okay.
so one of the unusual things with this film is that we shot the first part in LA, um, and then because there was a specific time of the year we wanted to film in Tucson, we actually had a pretty long pause, several months, before between the two parts. So we shot LA, and then the director and I worked together to edit that footage. And in doing so, that informed a lot of changes that we made for how we were going to shoot, um, even in terms of plot elements, how so the director went and rewrote the script, uh and that shaped and informed how we shot the Tucson, Arizona portion. And then once we got that shot, because by then we um really had a strong sense of um how it all needed to be, and because I was on set and I was already very familiar with the footage, the editorial process happened pretty quickly. So, because this is an independent film and we all have day jobs, so the director and I worked together on the weekends to edit the movie. But because we could be really efficient, the weekends were enough for us, which I think you can only really do if you're able to be very efficient.
Yeah, and yeah, and I mean, considering that it's an independent film, knowing that you guys were able to get it all filmed within that amount of time, and also edited within that amount of time, I mean, that is definitely great. And I mean, I even know from my own experience, since with all of my films, I actually was the one who edited them. Editing's a very time consuming process, but um, I mean, in my own opinion, you may or may not agree, but I feel like that if you truly understand how the software works, and especially if your software is willing to cooperate, it really truly makes it a lot easier. And and yeah, and I mean, sometimes, well, like what may take only just like a few seconds up on screen actually may take like hours and hours just to actually edit all that in. But again, it depends on the software, and it depends on if it's willing to cooperate. Like if your software is crashing quite often, that really can make it a lot more difficult, to have to go through that whole process. But yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
mentioned
know
that
exactly what you mean, and I agree. I'm an editor by trade, so I'm a professional editor, and I have been for a while, and so I very much have my ways in which I like to have things set up, and I'm also, a nerd about it all, and so I
Mhm.
know exactly how to set things up in a way where, I mean, I mean, we edited this movie in Adobe Premiere. It didn't crash at all. There were no crashes, so it all went very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, you definitely should feel very, very thankful about the fact that it never crashed once. But yeah, because unfortunately, with my last feature length film, I had a crash quite often. So yeah, it definitely makes for a very frustrating experience.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it really truly does. And yeah, and but yeah, I definitely am very, very happy for you, considering that you didn't have that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that experience before, but those were on projects that I inherited in some way. So the crashing tends to happen depending on how the project is set up. But there are ways of setting it up which pretty much eliminate or reduce that risk of crashing. And so, um, you know, I was the editor, but I was also essentially just the person who was in charge of all of post production.
Hmm.
And so the entire pipeline and how that worked was, something that I've developed over my experience that I know is a way of setting things up that really um, reduces or eliminates the risk of crashes. It just doesn't tax the system so hard, and it works well with how the software is designed to work. It's usually when you're doing something that's kind of pushing up against the limits of how the software was designed to work that there ends up, or that in combination with how it interacts with your hardware. But those are, yeah, I mean, I would say it wasn't just luck that it didn't crash. It's because I knew how to set it up that it wouldn't crash. And also, not to get like too much into the software, but the uh, Premiere in particular has done something that has been very helpful, which is that uh, if it does crash, and it's been like this, I think, for a few versions now, but if it does crash, it they've made it possible for it to automatically save right before that moment of crash, even if it's a sudden crash. So
Awesome.
even if it did crash, you could open it back up and it would leave off right where you you last were. And it's pretty seamless. I've seen it um even though we didn't crash much, I've seen it in instances recently where if that program did crash, it essentially made no difference. You just restart the software and it opened up the project immediately. So that was some kind of recent magic that they were able to put into the software.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And honestly, I truly had no idea that, yeah, I truly had no idea that recently that they started to do that, which, yeah, which is definitely great. I mean, it takes a lot of weight off of people's shoulders because, yeah, uh, when I first started to make my own films in 2009, I'll never forget just how frustrating it would be to have it shut down and then it wouldn't save, and then you're forced to start all over again. Like
Yeah, it's
it's
very
really
frustrating.
infuriating. And yeah, and I mean that really truly is awesome. Knowing that a lot of softwares like are doing that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so yeah, so you also mentioned that there were some scenes filmed in Tucson, Arizona. Um, did you guys choose Tucson because of its scenery, or was it for other reasons?
The scenery was definitely a big part. And you know, that was something that the director knew that he wanted to shoot there. It was also a practical consideration because we um, knew folks in Tucson, and so while we were there, we were able to. So, for example, our costume designer actually lives in Tucson,
Okay.
and so and she has her own house there, and our director knew that, and so the um, uh, wrote wrote it so that we could be shooting at that house. so that we wouldn't need to go find some house location over there. We already knew what that we had that and that we had that basically for free, just because it was something that, we were all kind of part of this team and she was already on our team and was happy to let us shoot at her house. So it was a place that we're all LA based, or most of us are LA based. A couple of the actors were based in New York. But as far as transporting all of us over there, we could actually just drive there. It's a full day's drive, but that was something we were able to do, which again was a practical consideration because we couldn't really afford to fly everybody out, and
Fair,
we
yeah.
couldn't afford to um, go there and try to get people from. I mean, we got a few people from Tucson to work on the movie for sure,
Hmm.
but it was a practical consideration as well as scenically, it does play a big part.
Yeah, which and I mean it definitely does help knowing that you had that resource already there, and so yeah, and and when it comes to filmmaking, you just gotta work with the resources that you do have versus what you don't have because it definitely just makes the whole job definitely a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's essential for an independent film. There's um, we we don't have much in the way of money on an independent film, so you have to maximize your resources. And usually, I mean, um, or at least it's smart to kind of catalog what you do have available to you and write something that would work for those so that you I think the not as good way to do it is um to write without thinking about your resources and locations, and then kind of be stuck having to get kind of a just kind of being able to get whatever you can get. So I don't know. I mean, like, just off the top of my head, if you wrote that something took place in an office building, but you can't actually get a hold of an office building, and so you were to shoot, you tried to like fake your room as an office building or something like that. You're forced into trying to play something for what it isn't, and that's something that usually would take more resources, so which
Hmm.
you probably don't have on an independent feature. So it would be better that if you knew that you had access to an office building, maybe somebody on the crew, their parent or somebody, or they work at a place where they know it looks really cool and they would be allowed to film there, then you can write something that takes place at this cool office building that you have access to. So you kind of
Hmm.
catalog
Yep.
uh, all the places that would look really cool and give a lot of production value that you have kind of free or cheap access to, and write things around that.
All right, cool. Awesome. Yeah, and I mean all that makes sense and I do believe, I don't know off the top of my head, but I believe that is an example as to where that some of the scenes that took place in said scenery weren't actually filmed there, but yet, but they just dressed it up in a way to make it seem as if it was. And so yeah, I mean, it definitely can be done. It just may be a little bit harder.
Yeah, I mean, it can always be done. I mean, movies do that all the time, but it's something that demands somewhat more resources. And so it is it's at least smart to kind of write it around what you have, or what you know that you have that you can dress as something else. So if you know that you have access to a stage that you can dress how you want, or that you have access to a room that you can go in and have the kind of permission and the time to kind of design it to look like another space, that also needs to be factored in. So you just kind of you're looking at everything through the lens of what is possible and like economical.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And yeah, and yeah, as far as the scenery goes in Arizona, yeah, and I mean, there is a reason why in so many calendars, as to why that you'll see so many pictures like of like the Grand Canyon and yeah, and a lot of other beautiful scenes in Arizona. It's like, it's just sometimes while those pictures can look amazing, but it's just seeing it in person is just, you know, it's just so much better.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's very beautiful.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so it sounds like that the majority of so it sounds like with I've seen all I need to see, it sounds like the majority of it was filmed in LA, right?
Not the majority. No, the majority was filmed in Tucson.
Okay.
We there's a part of the movie that takes place in LA, and so we shot that part first. But the
Fair, yeah.
majority of the movie takes place in Tucson.
Which, yeah, which definitely makes sense, sense that but yeah, I mean that makes sense as sense that you guys already had that resource of that house. And yeah, and I mean finding a house for a filming location, it can be hard, especially if it's someone's house who you don't know. I mean, getting them to be comfortable with having a bunch of people who they don't know come inside of their home and film. I can understand why a lot of people would say no, especially if it's a horror movie where there's a lot of gore, and then you and then risk potentially ruining their carpet and ruining their walls,
Yeah,
and
and that's
yeah,
why it can
so
be
I could
expensive
definitely.
if you are looking for a house that you don't already have. It can be very expensive.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it just depends upon where, since that housing markets vary. Housing markets definitely do vary. I mean, it varies on where in the world because there are some places where the housing market's higher. There's some where it's lower. Yeah, and I mean, from what I've seen, I'm in Los Angeles. I mean, the housing market there is definitely pretty expensive. But yeah,
Yeah,
I guess it just depends on where in LA and also in what kind of house.
exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, and so what is one key takeaway from this movie that you hope that um what do you hope that the audiences will take away?
I think, well, I mean, I think kind of going to what I was saying earlier, it's designed in a way where you take, different people can take different things away from it. There's a lot of space, I think, for people to put their own story and their own kind of history and their own experience with grief into it. And the movie doesn't, um, it doesn't tell you how you're supposed to feel about any
Mm-hmm.
of this necessarily. It it follows somebody as they are feeling what they're feeling. I think I think it's really just an invitation to kind of meditate on grief and violence as an aspect of being alive. If you're alive, then you will probably love somebody, even if in a complicated way. You'll experience attachment to people,
Mhm.
and the main relationship of the two sisters is complicated, and they're almost estranged, um, uh, before the other sister in Tucson dies, and that estrangement is part of the the strangeness of the grief that we see, because it's not like this was somebody that where they were, texting every day, or where they were very close with each other. They lived far apart. They didn't talk very often, but nevertheless, they grew up together, and there was love there. And so, I think the film is an invitation to meditate on the fact that if you are alive, you will have attachments to people, and if you have attachments to people, you will experience grief, because people in your, um, everybody will experience something to grieve about, whether that is people that they know and love who pass away, whether that's, um, I mean, this is specifically about that kind of grief. And I think it's it's not suggesting that there's any particular way to grieve. It's really more opening the door up to seeing, um, and sensing that grief is a very wide spectrum, and so this is a little slice of that suggests a much bigger ocean of possibility, uh, of how grief is experienced.
So basically, it sounds like to me that one of the things that is hoped for with this movie is to get people to think about how grief definitely is I mean, grief definitely is a pretty nuanced topic, and and on top of that, uh and people can grieve like in multiple ways. There are some people like who will grieve the loss of their job. There will be some people who will grieve the loss of a relationship, whether if it's romantic, or if it's a professional one, or if it was a friendship that ended for more reasons than one. And yeah, and so yeah, and the thing is, the older we get, the older everyone else gets, and yeah, and eventually everybody in our life, for more reasons than one, eventually all of them are going to pass on.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the central facts of life that suffering is inevitable. If you're alive and you have people that you love, and you have expectations and hopes, and all these, that you will experience suffering. And so, a lot of life, or a lot of wisdom, is about, um, how do you handle that suffering? How do you, because suffering is inevitable,
Yep.
but, uh, there are there are some people that suffer more than others, and it's not necessarily because of what happened to them. It's because of how it's kind of a mental and emotional state, that they're in. There are folks that can, kind of understand, uh, the whatever is happening, in a context that allows them to, um, uh, I suppose, not take it as personally, which somewhat alleviates the the intensity of that suffering, um, because these things are not personal. If somebody, like, people die, and so if a person dies, that's not that's not a personal thing. That's something that everybody. That's just a fact of life, and it's a fact of life that creates suffering. But there's that level of suffering, and then there's extra suffering that we can kind of do to ourselves, um if we're not really in the habit of developing an awareness of that, of how grief or how suffering operates, and the degree to which it's, not personal. So, if something bad happens to somebody, and somebody kind of, um even long after the bad thing happens, if they keep playing it over and over in their mind, if they keep trying to think about what they should have done different or said different, and if they have lots of regrets about something, or if they just feel like it was unjust and so they kind of play it in their mind over and over and get angrier and angrier about the situation. That's what I think of anyway, is like additional suffering that they're creating for themselves on top of the fact of the bad thing that happened. And so the fact that bad things happen is not controllable. Everybody will experience that.
Yep.
But that extra suffering is something that we do have control over. That has to do with just our state of mind that we cultivate. So
Mhm.
I think, all that to say, what at least I hope for, or something that I think about, is how, you know, even if I cannot eliminate suffering and suffering is a part of my life, what are the ways of thinking that I can cultivate that at least allow me to not have to experience that additional suffering on top of the necessary suffering. There's like necessary suffering and unnecessary suffering. So I will experience the necessary suffering because we all will, but I
Mhm.
maybe can avoid the unnecessary suffering.
Yeah, it reminds me of a saying that life is 10% what happens to you, and the rest is how you respond to it. And
Exactly.
I mean, granted, there will be some circumstances that will be a lot harder to deal with, such as if somebody got into a car wreck. I mean, yeah, that can be really hard to have to deal with. But growth is something that all of us a lot like will go through. I mean, some of us definitely will grow a lot more than others. That is for sure. But I mean, ultimately, most of us never do remain the same person that we were as teenagers, into our 20s, 30s, and and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, these things, um, we grow and we change, and I think, to bring it back to this movie, I mean, the main character is not the same at the end of the movie as she is at the beginning of the movie before all of
Mhm.
this happens. So grief changes us as well, but
Oh, definitely.
um we can I think I think not that this is something that the movie is saying, but I think that in what it's showing, we have some degree of control over how the grief will change us. The grief
Yep.
will change us, will shape us, but there's instances in which something bad happens, and through the way the person is grieving, they become kind of worse in a way. They develop maybe resentments or regrets, or just kind of have um, they become darker energetically somehow, because there's something very sticky about the negative energy around that event. Um, Whereas somebody else could be going through, the same event, but they make a choice, just kind of through their awareness, that, for example, I mean, just this is perhaps the most obvious example, but if a person dies, one of the things that you can experience as you go through that grief could be an appreciation for how we have limited time on this earth. And
Yep.
so, a healthy way of experiencing that event, and going through that event, could be a deeper appreciation and a more kind of immediate appreciation for, you know, um, there's no amount of time that's promised to us. We don't know how long we have, and just, everybody does eventually die. So what in the face of that, what do you want to spend your time and your emotional energy on? And so a healthy way to respond to that would be to spend more time with the people that you love while they're still here, you know? And so that's an example of like a healthy way of dealing with grief. And so you become, the event does indeed change you for the better. And you hope that you can try to guide whatever kind of experience of shock that you're experiencing, that you can um, try to navigate it in such a way that it, like you said earlier, it's a roller coaster, but if you can get to a point where you you are able to gain perspective in a way that can better your life.
Yeah, and I mean, we only have one shot at life, and so and therefore, eventually when we pass on, now of course I mean, the meaning of life is a pretty, it's a pretty nuanced topic, and I don't claim to have it all figured out, but I genuinely do believe that the legacy that you leave behind definitely plays a big part in that, and then the legacy that you leave behind is it's going to be defined in what you decide in this moment.
Yeah, and it's we everybody, all of us have things that we take for granted, just
Yep.
about the fact of being alive. We just go through day by day, and we're just kind of concerned with the immediate things that we need to be concerned about, and that's fine. But sometimes there are moments, and they might be kind of shocking moments, or moments that would, produce kind of like a grieving process. But one potential um, positive aspect of that, or silver lining, I suppose, is it might shock us out of our, kind of taking things for granted state, and kind of bring us into a more immediate state, awareness state. And, um, then through that, we kind of remember the fact that life is always just this moment, you know?
Yeah, and and as much as it might suck for all of us to have to go through grief, and as much as it might suck like for all of us to have to go through whichever trial it is that we're going through, but one healthy way to look at it is, okay, what are some of the takeaways? What are some of the takeaways that I can take from that experience? Like, say for argument's sake, if somebody got into a car accident, say if they were busy on their phone, or say if they were driving too fast when the roads were icy, they should have put their phone away. B, say if the roads were icy, they shouldn't have been driving as fast, and so on and so forth. And yeah, and it's just, oftentimes we then should say, okay, what could I have done? Uh, and I mean, even if so and so circumstance was not our fault, but there's always takeaways. Like, say, unfortunately, if you lose someone from suicide, even though that, yeah, even though that you may not have control over what they did, it definitely can make people think that that maybe I should have talked to that person more. And I mean, a lot of times, people have a difficult time, trying to make time for their friends. And I mean, and I totally get it. All of us get busy with our lives and things come up, but it's just going back to what you said. Sometimes we definitely do take things, you know, like there are things that I mean, it's not that we don't appreciate it. We certainly do, but we just take it all for granted. And then, and then just wish that we could have spent more time with that person. But ultimately, what matters is that we are doing the best that we can.
Absolutely. And I think it's good to give ourselves and other people grace for that. We are
Mhm. Yep.
trying to do what we can, with what we've got, and there's no perfect way to navigate life and
Yep.
all the things that happen in it. Um, you just try and do better, knowing that you won't do perfect. And same for everybody else, So to give that grace to other people as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because it's all a part of the human experience, knowing that we're not always going to do everything perfectly. We're not always going to say the right thing. We're not always going to do the right thing, and a lot of people you know, like to make it out to be that where, oh, if you make one mistake, well, and then they'll just cancel you as a person, and that it's either you're good or bad. And now, while yes, there are some people like who make mistakes and they have bad intent, but it's but again, it's a lot more nuanced. It's just, or maybe they just made a genuine error. And it's one thing that, say, if you're going to be prideful about it and then not take accountability, but if so and so person genuinely takes accountability, then I definitely think that people definitely should give them a lot more respect, and also and a lot more. I mean, you definitely got to hand it to them, that, hey, that at least that they're doing the best that they can.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we're understanding more and more is that people act out of kind of subconscious trauma responses.
Yep.
And so sometimes people might be doing something bad or unwise, either, harmful to themselves or others, but it's it's coming out of this subconscious traumatic response. And so there's kind of this degree of which, people are responsible for their own actions, so they have to take
Yep.
accountability for that.
Yep.
But there is this other layer of not everybody really, or everybody has something that they're not really in total control of. Nobody's really in that much control of themselves. I think we kind of give too much credence to that, uh at least in my personal perspective and observations. And I think even like when there's essentially um scientific studies now that can back this up. I was reading a headline a couple days ago that um kind of that showed that about 80% of what we do is automatic. 80% of kind of the brain functions that determine our behavior and our actions is automatic. A lot of that is just whatever we do day to day. It's not
Yep.
really conscious decisions that we're making. So between that and the kind of subconscious traumatic responses where somebody's doing something and they might not really know why they're doing it, or maybe something that they know that they should be doing but they're not doing it, and I think everybody understands, what that might be. Everybody has things that they do that they know aren't good for themselves, but they still do it. Uh, the most kind of probably relatable one would be how much time we spend looking at our phones and the internet. Nobody wants to be spending that much time on their phone, but they are. And even when they try to stop, they can't, or if you look at any sort of like substance abuse or anything like that, it's not like they don't know that this is bad for them. They do know that it's bad for them, but it is just, I suppose my point is we're not purely logical creatures. where
Yep.
it's like, oh, this is good for me, so I'm going to do that. That's bad for me, so I'm not going to do that. Nobody really operates that way. And so that is something that, at least as if we can understand that and we allow that to shape our understanding of the world and other people's behavior, it at least, again, I think it softens things up, and it allows you to take a kind of softer view of the world and other people with more grace, other people and also yourself. And that's one of the things that I think you can do to reduce that kind of extra suffering that I was talking about, the
Yep.
extra suffering on top of the necessary suffering. Because if you don't have that sense of grace and understanding, then you look around and you're just angry at everybody, which just creates this suffering in your own heart. Um, so anyway, that's a whole big tangent, but it's nevertheless, it's I think it's that kind of thinking about human nature that informs a movie like I've Seen All I Need to See. So even though it's not prescribing anything, I think it's a product of a kind of like a curiosity and sense of awareness and observation about human behavior, and that's what the movie's interested in.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely a real shame that when I first heard about the movie at the Mint Film Festival where it was showing it, it's just a real shame that I didn't have time to watch it and that I had to get going. But with all that said, so if anybody tuning into this episode, besides all the film festivals that it's showing at, would you maybe have an idea as to when people will as to when that people can watch it?
Yeah, so let's see here. Let me just look at the um what you can do is you can either follow me and or the director of the film, because we're you know uh promoting anytime that it's playing at a festival, and it's going to be playing at several festivals um throughout the next several months. But of course, eventually the intention is for us to find a distributor and get it distributed probably sometime mid to late next year.
Okay.
Yeah, so just kind of generally keeping an eye out for it. Um, uh, that would be that'd be the way to go. I don't I don't think we don't have like a specific Instagram page for the film, so it's best to follow myself and the director.
All right, cool, awesome. Well, I definitely do want to wish you and everyone the best of luck with all that. And yeah, just keep your fingers crossed. And yeah, and I mean, with it being shown at all these film festivals, I definitely do feel pretty confident that you guys will find somebody.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. So yeah, and so with all that said, yeah, we're about at the hour mark. Um, uh, would there be anything else that you would want the audience to be aware of about this movie?
That's pretty much it. I mean, I think beyond that, um, yeah, if you get an opportunity to see it, then it's better to not know too much going in, and just
Yes, of course.
hopefully, um, I mean, I think that's the nice thing about getting some of these, um, you know, uh, awards, is in a way there it's y- you know that other people have said that it was good, so that hopefully that is the reason that you then go watch it, even though you don't know too much about it, so that you can still kind of go in blind, or go in without knowing too much about it. So I think um, even in our promotional materials, like our trailer and things like that, we don't want to give too much away so that people can still experience the film fresh. But yeah, we nevertheless want people to be eager to see it. So it's good that they can at least go watch it, because it other people have said it was good.
Yeah, which I certainly greatly appreciate the fact that you said that, because I feel like that with so many big name movies coming out where with the advent of social media, it's made it even harder to try to avoid spoilers, and 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 also in just knowing that they'll make announcements about casting like for said movie, and then you and then know like who all the characters are, and so and therefore when you're watching said movie, you are then waiting for so and so person in so and so movie to show up. And yeah, and unfortunately, when I went to go see Spider-Man No Way Home, I tried to avoid spoilers. And I'm not sure if you've seen Spider-Man No Way Home, but it's just that there was one really, really, really big spoiler about the movie that I unfortunately got ruined for me, like just like days before I went to go see it. I was, you know, there were some people like who were in the theater and then they would record it on their phones and then they would upload it to YouTube. And then, I always wanted to go on to YouTube, you know, because there were some songs that I was wanting to go check out, and then in my news feed, I can't always control what's gonna come in my news feed, and then that would come up, and I'm like, come on, people, have some
Yeah,
courtesy. And on top of that, knowing that what they did actually is against the law, so I'm like, really, you're gonna put yourself at risk of getting arrested, and then you're gonna upload it to the internet?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's I know exactly what you're talking about, and there's some things where you just I don't know what you do about that, other than just if it's a movie you really care about, you try to see it as soon as possible so that it doesn't get spoiled for you. But yeah, it can be a bit of a minefield when there's a movie you're anticipating, and or TV shows or anything like that. You almost have to kind of like plug your ears until you can see it.
Exactly, yeah. And unfortunately, with social media, it's been both a blessing and a curse.
Yep,
And and one of the I guess the curses of social media, it's made it a lot harder to avoid spoilers.
that's true.
It has. But anyways, I don't want to take up too much of your time. But yeah, I certainly greatly do appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here. And yeah, and I definitely will leave a link in the description for people to go follow you on your Instagram page.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. You have a fantastic day.